Well, it looks like the ACC could be crumbling before our eyes. Looks that way. No one really seems to actually know what's going on over there, but Clemson now has joined Florida State in suing their own league and then issued a statement saying they were still members of the ACC. It's getting nasty over there. Obviously, both those teams want more money. I don't know that they necessarily want out, but are they worth the money? Uh, if I'm asking the question, it usually means no, but we'll get into it right now. So, what would this mean for the SEC and Georgia specifically if there were the destruction of the ACC as we know it? Because one of Georgia's, three traditional rivals plays in that league, and they're not one of the two that's throwing up a bunch of dust right now. It's Clemson and Florida State. There's a lot to go on here to process. When you talk to people, behind the scenes, and a lot of them are just they don't know necessarily. They suspect, but Georgia's always going to play Florida. Like that is always going to happen until the end of time. There's a lot of different reasons for that, but Georgia and the Gators will always play. They will almost always play at a neutral site, which will nearly always be Jacksonville. I think we're going to see what happens with the stadium being built and so forth, but Georgia's that game coming to Athens, just it's not going to happen. I mean, it would be very strange for that to happen. They'd be taking a loss in money, and this does come down to money. And for everybody, just save this is all about money. Yeah, it is. It's been all about money since the dawn of time. Why do you think they charge people to get in the games in the 40s and the 30s? Come on, y'all. Which gets back to the point with what would happen to the ACC if Florida State and Clemson left. Well, it would not dissolve right now because there's 15 members. But and I mean they could offer Memphis tomorrow. There's no shortage of people to go to the ACC. ACC is not necessarily going anywhere. If North Carolina blows it up, that's a different ball game. But for all the people who are out there and about, you notice the one team I just mentioned there, Carolina's not doing anything because they know one way or the other they would have a landing place. They would be quickly accepted in the Big Ten for sure. And I think the SEC would take them. I think they're the one big school besides Notre Dame that's out there that the SEC would, without question, and the members without question would all be like, yep, let's take them. After that, I don't, it's not that I don't know. It's that it's not so sure. And a lot of this comes down to math. And a lot of the reason why we're in the position that we're in right now is because of math. Right now, in 2024, by league, the problem is the money is so far out of whack that the ACC schools are earning per school about $28 million a year fewer just from the television rights for their conference. Then you have the college football playoff discrepancy, which is about the same. It's maybe even more. And so that's it. Like Florida State and Clemson know if they let this go on, they'll get buried by Kentucky, basically. I mean, like it's too far gone. So they're willing right now to blow the whole thing up. The question is, if they blow it up, where would they land? And that's not so obvious to me. I can report to you, Georgia's not so hot about having either of these teams in the SEC. I think they'd vote no right now. That doesn't mean they wouldn't get into the league, but Georgia would probably vote no, if not certainly vote no. Florida State, I don't think Georgia is interested in them coming around, and I don't think there's no why. Why would Georgia want either of these schools in the league? What is their value? Are they more valuable than Texas and Oklahoma? Well, the fact is they're not. So if they were, they would probably have been in the SEC by now. But the numbers bear it out. They just are not watched the same way that, first of all, SEC schools are. And then B, generally speaking, they're not as watched as Texas and Oklahoma. Now, Clemson had a great run for about half a decade. That's fallen off, and the viewership has fallen off. And so that's why, you're a little bit talking about apples to applesauce here, because Texas has had bad seasons too. But this past year they had a great one, and they showed just how watched they can be. Oklahoma, they're neither of the. So put it to you this way: Florida State and Clemson are not as valuable as Auburn. So where's Auburn in the hierarchy of the SEC? They're better than Mississippi State. They're better than Arkansas. What I mean to say is they have more value. There's more people that watch them. Those are predicated, though, on games against, very specifically, Alabama and Georgia, in Auburn's case. So would Clemson have more people watch them if they were playing an SEC schedule? If they played Georgia and Alabama every season, wouldn't they have more people watching them? Yes, they would. Is that the case with Florida State? For sure. I mean, if Florida State were playing Georgia and Alabama every single season like Auburn does, then they would have more value. This is the Clemson fans definitely, and the Florida State fans certainly lately, they get their feelings hurt real easy because they feel like they are big time college football programs, and they are. They're just not SEC programs, which is a factual statement. And then they really get their feelings hurt when you point that out, and it's like, hey man, I mean, that's kind of, you got to deal with your feelings. That's your deal. Right now, each SEC game, the payment for each game that Disney is paying per school, so all 128 games, the 128 games are worth $343,750. Okay, that's what the $44 million. A lot of people are getting the math very wrong. All told. I mean, they're talking about a $300 million contract for the SEC. They're leaving a lot out on that front. The television value per year of these schools is of these contracts is what you really want to pay attention to, not the total value of distribution. So how does the math work? You want to know? That's fine. The ACC has a $4.8 billion contract with Disney. It goes for 20 years. That works out to $240 million a year. That's 15 schools. And when you divide 240 by 15, that leaves you $16 million per school. There's 120 football games. That means each ACC contest, this is just conference contests, those are worth $133 million, give or take, something like that. Now, I'm just doing the contract divided by the conference games only. It's the easiest way to do apples to apples. I know that Texas, Alabama, and Tuscaloosa is not included in this because it's not an SEC game in the past. It will be in the future, but it's not included. So we're just basically doing the television contract divided by the conference games. That's the best way to get apples to apples. So that means that an ACC contest, a conference contest, Florida State Clemson, is worth about a third of the value of Tennessee Alabama. Okay. Now we all know that there's other dollars that go into each school. There's sponsorships from the conference level. There's college football playoff that comes from that is not included in these numbers. There are NCAA tournament credits, which are very valuable. They are not included in this. So there's a zillion different things, but when you just boil it down to what is driving college sports away from one another or together in some cases, that's what it is. Is Disney willing to pay Florida State and Clemson $28 million more each per year to go to the SEC? I don't think the answer to that is yes. Is Fox willing to pay them new money to go to the Big Ten? About $50-ish million, whatever Oregon and UW are getting. So that I don't think in any situation that Clemson and Florida State are going to get the full rate. Okay, they're just not. They have no leverage. So I think their best bet is to merge into the SEC. I'm not so sure that's going to happen. I feel like I got a really good pulse on the SEC considering I covered Georgia and I've covered the SEC since 2001. And I know a lot of people at the office, and I know obviously folks in Athens. I am skeptical that there's not a lot of value there. And then of course the SEC network is more valuable than the ACC network, which is fine, But the problem with that for Clemson and Florida State specifically is they don't offer new cable market. I know cable's dying, but it's still around. So they don't offer, you bring Florida State in, it's already covered in that state. You've already got the Gators, people are already paying for that as part of their basic cable package. So the math here is just the problem for Florida State and Clemson both specifically is they have leaders that don't have vision. They just don't. And you could see this coming a decade ago, and a decade ago is when they should have left and gone to the Big 12. Then they would have had the ability with Texas and Oklahoma to leave to go to the SEC in 2020. Just no vision. And, for the record, that doesn't mean that everybody else doesn't have vision either. The SEC was getting jammed for years for that SEC contract with CBS. $55 million a year, disaster. And now they're getting paid over $300 million a year for that same contract. So people want to know, oh, well, Clemson and Florida State, this, that, and the other. Y'all, this is about a mathematical fit, and does it work? Would Florida vote for Florida State to come in? Would Georgia vote for Florida State in? Would Auburn? Would Alabama? I think those four would probably be a no. Now, I don't know what the Mississippi schools would be, but four might not block it. But they could all get on their high horse together and say, well, South Carolina could say, hey, we're the vote you need. And they could say, well, if you block Clemson, we'll block Florida State. I don't think it's that simple necessarily. We're not in the 90s anymore. The other question is, do either of these teams bring value? Are they more valuable in the SEC than them going to the Big Ten? That is the real question of all of this is are you okay with the Big Ten taking a fair amount of the ACC? Are you okay with them taking North Carolina, Virginia, Notre Dame, Clemson, Florida State, and Georgia Tech? Why Georgia Tech? Well, I mean, there's no market in Clemson. They don't, if Clemson reverts back to what they were for the 20 years before their great run for 5 years, then they don't matter. They are Illinois. I mean, Illinois is probably great. They are a poor man's Wisconsin. So they don't really turn people on. Florida State has always had that, and they've had a horrible time. But Florida State they're not Texas, but they're in the universe of that. I mean, Clemson's not. Georgia Tech certainly is not, but they have the Atlanta television market, even though it's a Georgia market. So folks will look at it as how many fans do you have? And neither of those two fan bases, as I'm talking about, either have giant fan bases. They have big fan bases. They don't have North Carolina, and they're not Notre Dame. Notre Dame and North Carolina are the big fish that are left. That's it. UCF, no one cares. Arizona, Houston, whoever else is out there, no, they don't matter. It's really, the game is probably in this order: Notre Dame, North Carolina, and maybe you could flip them, but I don't think so. And then Virginia, perhaps. And then probably Florida State and Clemson. Virginia, I'm not as certain would be in front of Clemson and Florida State because they're just putrid at football and apparently at basketball these days. But if you're looking to figure out where these are going to go or where we're going, Clemson and Florida State may be just trying to break the whole ACC up so they can start from scratch. Clemson and Florida State might be figuring out how they can leave in 2027 or 2028. Clemson and Florida State may be trying to go to the Big 12. They may be trying to go to the the Big 10. They may be trying to go. I know they're trying to go to the SEC. I just don't know if they got a dance partner there, not just with the league, but with Disney as well. I mean, again, Disney already has these guys, and they're paying them $16 million a year. Are they going to create $28 million worth of reason a year for them to go to the SEC? They're just not. They're not. I mean, the viewership is not there. That's the problem, and Notre Dame better watch it too, because they're not exactly rolling up numbers the way that, they did decades gone by. So that's when you say, what will the future be? Will it involve Clemson and Florida State in the SEC? It could. It could also involve them in the Big Ten. It could also involve them in a blown up ACC that only has Miami, Clemson, Florida State, North Carolina, NC State, Virginia Tech, and Georgia Tech or something. And that's it. No Pitt, no Boston College, no Wake, no Duke, no money suckers, for lack of a better term. Now, this won't happen either. What I'm about to say will not happen. But if you're talking about replacing Vanderbilt and Mississippi State With Clemson and Florida State, that's a different conversation. But that's not the conversation we're having. Okay? That is not at all in the realm. I mean, conferences aren't kicking teams out. That's not what's going on. They are recruiting and trying to stay alive. It's just bad out there, man. It's bad out there, right? And you notice I didn't mention Miami at all because they have no value. I mean, I think probably Clemson has more value than Miami. That might, I don't know, but probably right now they do. I mean, Miami's a joke. So I think which one has more potential? Miami, but not the way they are right now, and not the way they've been this century, basically for say the last 20 years, not this century perhaps, but yeah, what will it mean for the SEC? I don't know that it means anything yet. This is such a strange time, and there's a lot of numbers that are just, I'm just going to tell you, they're not correct in terms of, it's this. No, it's not $300 million in the SEC. The SEC is getting paid $710 million by Disney alone. That does not count for Mercedes, BC Powder, the SEC network, NCAA tournament revenues. None of those are included in that number of $710 million that they distribute. So, will the SEC network become more powerful? Will we just be going straight up a la carte by the conference for ESPN and Disney in the future? I mean, some of us have been doing that for a long time, and we could see that in the future too. When you look at the Big Ten has a great contract. My worry for the Big Ten, and the media companies might not care about this. My worry for the Big Ten is that when they turn around in 2030, or when they start negotiating in 2028, that the money won't be there like it's been there, and they are hooked to Fox in a way that they might not want to be. They are hooked to Fox. So is the SEC, by the way, to Disney. But I just don't know. I mean, the SEC had such a better contract for such better revenue for a long time versus what the Big Ten had. But now the Big Ten is caught up, and the SEC can't go again until the middle of the 2030s. But by then, everything could explode. By then, I think explode is the wrong word, and I'll stop talking. Explode is the wrong term, but sort of melt away and change dramatically. Yeah, we could see that. We could just see the Big Ten and the SEC, and that's college sports as we know it.